Aloha and good afternoon to you all, and welcome to today's EWC Insights. Today's talk will be conducted by Dr. Hiro Jung on liberal peace on the Korean Peninsula, the nexus between economic cooperation and security. Dr. Hiro Jung is a postgrad visiting fellow at the East-West Center, and he is also an assistant professor in the Department of Political Science at California State University, Dominguez Hills. He holds a PhD in political science from the University of Maryland, College Park, and he was also a non-resident Korea Foundation Fellow at the Pacific Forum. His areas of expertise include international human rights, trade and conflict, and security issues in Northeast Asia. His latest publication is titled Economic Interdependence and Conflict, which was co-authored with Scott Kastner and published in the Oxford Research Encyclopedia of Politics. Just before I welcome Dr. Chung, one of the housekeepings is if you have any questions during his presentation, please submit any of your questions in the Q&A chat. Welcome, Dr. Chung.
Thank you, Tammy. Aloha, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Hyojun Jang. I'm a postgrad visiting fellow at East-West Center, and I'm also assistant professor in Political Science Department in California State University, Dominguez Hills. I'm glad to be here today to talk about the liberal peace on the Korean Peninsula. I will focus on the nexus between economic ties at the Kaesong Industrial Complex and security on the Korean Peninsula. I will try to provide a theoretical framework, and I will try to evaluate the past Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex experience. Okay, let me get started. I wanna share my PowerPoint slide. Okay. All right. Okay, so Kaesong Industrial Complex, let me give you basic information about the complex. It is a joint North-South Korean manufacturing park in Kaesong, North Korea. So Kaesong is a city in North Korea, and it's quite just across the border between North and South. And Kaesong is not far from capital city of South Korea, Seoul, just about 40 miles apart, so 70 kilometers, so very near the Seoul capital. And I can drive to Kaesong in 1.5 hours without custom and borders, of course. So the Kaesong Industrial Complex has remained closed since February 2016, and it was a response by the Park Geun-hye government to North Korea's nuclear test and rocket launch. So the successor, the Moon Jae-in government, he tried really hard to reopen the KIC, but the hope for the reopening KIC gradually disappeared as inter-Korean tension arose after the failed bilateral negotiation between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump, followed by the deteriorating inter-Korean relations. And North Korea in 2019 destroyed the Liaison office building in Kaesong, and that was a major blow to the high hope for the KIC reopening. And the recent inauguration of Yoon Suk-yeol government in South Korea, that's pretty much putting the nail in KIC coffin, because he is conservative and he never talked about KIC and possibility of a reopening. So KIC has been quite controversial issue. Some people argue that KIC should have survived political and security crisis, and they expect KIC as a last but very important component of inter-Korean cooperation to facilitate economic cooperation and promoting peace and security on the Korean Peninsula. But there is a group of people with this skeptical perspective, and they argue that security concerns associated with the North Koreans' increasing missile and nuclear capability should be heavily weighted in deciding to continue to economically engage North Korea. This perspective implies that the inter-Korean economic cooperation would not guarantee the peace on the Korean Peninsula, and actually that economic cooperation may worsen the South Korean security by possibly funding North Korean missile and nuclear weapons program. The past experience of KIC, the Kaesong Industrial Complex, when you look at the current stalemate of the nuclear negotiation and deteriorating security environment on the Korean Peninsula, and the KIC advocate, they actually have to make a case for reopening the KIC. They need more reason than economic benefit of using cheaper North Korean labors. They really have to connect the rationale, the reason for reopening KIC to security implications, the security effect on the Korean Peninsula. Okay? But the problem is there is no clear theoretical understanding between security and economic ties, and we don't really know yet how the KIC and economic cooperation would affect security on the Korean Peninsula. And most literature on the Kaesong Industrial Complex describe the origin and historical development and some challenges faced by South Korean and international community. And there is a very lack of theoretical framework that would kind of hinder the debate about KIC and the security implication of economic ties between North and South Korea. And also pro-containment or pro-pressure groups, they also need some framework to understand the complex relationship between economic ties and security. So today, I will try to talk about how we can connect economic ties to security on the Korean Peninsula. And let me introduce 3 theoretical ideas, or I can call 3 causal mechanisms connecting economic cooperation to security. The first theory is that economic ties constrain conflict behavior. Second idea is that economic ties enable country to send a costly signal. The last causal mechanism, the theory is that economic tie can transform state players, their preference and interests. Okay, so after discussing these 3 theoretical framework, I will try to evaluate the past KIC experience, and then I will try to discuss what lesson we learned from the past experience. So this is first causal mechanism, constraining theory. Some people call this theory opportunity cost argument. Okay, so this theory should be quite similar to many of you. Economic ties like trade and create mutual benefit for countries by facilitating the efficient use of limited resources. So when 2 trading partners engage in military conflict, and commerce between them is very likely to be disrupted. And these economic cutoff add more cost to the initiation and conduct of war. And political leaders, therefore, they should become quite reluctant to risk a military conflict with the trading partner, with the country, especially with a very high degree of economic ties. And let me explain the second approach, second theory. It is called cost signaling or signaling theory. The second mechanism linking economic interdependence to security suggests that countries can communicate their resolve more credibly when there is a higher level of economic interdependence between these 2 countries. So this logic is called cost signaling or information logic. And this idea is based on bargaining theory of war, but the idea is quite straightforward and simple. So war is likely when countries miscalculate the cost and benefit of going to war compared to when they negotiate. So when a miscalculation on both or either side occurs, then they are unable to reach negotiate settlement and eventually engage in armed conflict. Economic ties can serve, in this context, economic ties can serve as an effective signaling tool. It allows countries to send cautious signal that their resolve to fight is not a bluff. And economic ties can offer countries 2 different ways to make causative signal. So the first one is country can send the causative signal through self-inflicting measures like imposing economic sanctions against its trading partner. So by causing damage to itself, and then country can credibly communicate with the trading partner about its true intention and resolve. The second way of making causative signal through economic interdependence is through countries' response to the economic costs imposed by the other, the trading partner. So by enduring the economic costs, the message is credibly sent to the other that they are quite committed. They are quite determined not to back down and it's willing to escalate and use military force if necessary. And the net outcome is that country can update their preference, they update their information about the others' resolve and political will, and they can come up with a more accurate calculation of the expected benefit of going to war, and they may see bargaining space and they want to reach a negotiated settlement rather than going to war because they have more accurate information and they have a more accurate calculation about the expected benefit, utility of the fighting. Okay. All right. So the last theory is transformation of state preference and interests. So the last causal mechanism suggests that the KIC can drive the two countries to change their preference and interests, decreasing conflicting interests and increasing shared and common interests. And this is so the first two mechanisms assume that the actors' preference and interests are quite fixed, and this approach takes a quite different approach. This approach takes different assumption that those state interests and preference can change over time. So this is quite a sociological process where the two countries have more contact, and those more contacts can be expanded on a larger scale to other areas like political and social and cultural exchange as economic ties gets stronger and stronger. Then a sense of community may develop. Security community could be also developed. Then security community and sense of community may create kind of assurance between countries that their differences can be resolved and negotiated through diplomacy rather than through the military conflict. And mutual understanding, there will be a better mutual understanding. There will be convergence of the state interest and preference. Then territorial conquest through the military force could be less valuable and less viable to political leaders and general publics. And this transformational process is quite facilitated by vested interests in both countries. So first of all, this is economic interdependence. So business community may take a leading role to create this kind of coalition. But there are also other stakeholders like politicians, investors, consumers, journalists, scholars, and the general public. So when there's a higher level of economic interdependence, and these stakeholders are less likely to have conflicting views with their trading partners, because armed conflict would cost them some political, economic, and social. There will be social implication costs they have to pay. So these stakeholders would make a coalition, domestic political coalition, and they may exercise their power to pressure the government to adopt more friendly and more sustainable and stable foreign policy toward the trading partners. And these all sociological process and transformation of state interest and preference will contribute to peace and more cooperation between the countries. Okay, so I briefly discuss three different causal mechanism theory linking security to economic ties, right? So constraining, signaling, and transforming. So how can we apply this theory to the past 15 years of KIC experience? So let me talk about the first theory, constraining. So first of all, the Kaesong industrial complex certainly generate economic gain for South Korea and North Korea. Okay, so for South Korea first, since its creation in 2002, the number of South Korean companies operating in the complex grew from 18 in 2005 to 125 in 2015. The primary products manufactured in this complex include textile, clothing, chemical product, metal, machinery, and electronics, and some other stuff. The total production also increased from $300 million in 2010 to $520 million in 2015. So using cheaper North Korean labor certainly reduce South Korean companies' production costs so that they can make more money, they can increase their revenues. Okay. And according to South Korean government, since it's shut down in February 2016, the cost of shutdown, the cost of KIC shutdown, because of the shutdown, there is about $662 million as a opportunity cost. Okay, and North Korea is pretty much the same. There were economic gain for North Korea. And KIC established the creation of the Kaesong Industrial Complex came with the upgraded transportation, network, infrastructure, and power facility in Kaesong and nearby region. And North Korean employees increased from about 6,000 in 2005 to 55,000 in 2015. So there's a creation of jobs for North Korea. The North Korea also received the worker salary in hard currency from South Korea. So hard currency is the regime is desperate to acquire, right? And total estimated wage of North Korean workers in KIC were about $123 million in 2015. So there are economic gains for North Korea and South Korea. So when there is a disruption of KIC operation, certainly create opportunity costs for two Koreas. But in conclusion, the KIC project fell quite short of its initial aspiration in terms of size and quality. So it's the original blueprint, and the final stage of the Kaesong Industrial Complex would host 2,000 companies, employ 350,000 workers, and generate the value of $16 billion in annual production. Then the reality was the very first stage of development was not completed because of the uncertainty and political decision by two Koreas. So on the South Korean part, the Lee Myung-bak governments, before Park Geun-hye government, the Lee Myung-bak government ultimately abandoned plan to expand the KIC. That was after North Korea tested nuclear weapons in 2006. So the lack of investment and expansion of the complex led to KIC just accounting for a fraction of 1% of South Korea GDP. For North Korea, it's pretty much the same. The KIC took up slightly over 1% of its foreign trade. Of course, the KIC operation gave North Korea hard currency they really need, but there were some other sources. North Korea can get hard currency from other international interaction with the other foreign governments. Okay, so as economic sanction imposed by United Nations Security Council and other countries, of course, including United States, continued, the Kim Jong-un regime became heavily dependent on China for its importation of food, fabric, oil, and electronics. And when we compare the KIC to other cases like cross-strait relation and China and Japan economic relation, the magnitude and quality of the inter-Korean economic cooperation is quite, I would say, insignificant or rudimentary at best. Okay. So the value of, for example, the value of cross-strait trade was $150.5 billion in 2018, and between China and Japan, they had about $300 billion in trade value in 2019. And as we know, Japan's foreign direct investment in China is quite large, so about 11.3 billion in 2020. So compared to the other economic cooperation, the KIC inter-Korean economic cooperation, the magnitude and the quality, the magnitude is quite small. And when it comes to quality, yes, it is very rudimentary. Okay. So overall, the deficient economic cooperation in the complex has not really produced enough opportunity cost to constrain security behavior policy on Korean Peninsula. That's the first implication and the first conclusion we can draw from the past experience. And the pacifying effect of the KIC appears quite small, or I would say non-existent. And as we all know, low intense military conflict have not been prevented. So in March 2010, South Korean Navy ship Cheonan was sunk with the loss of 46 lives. And 9 months later, in the same year, North Korea shelled the island of Yeonpyeong and killing two South Korean citizens and 2 Marines. And North Korea also continued to develop its nuclear weapons program and missile capability. So North Korea tested nuclear weapons 6 times from 2006 to 2017. And North Korea, the regime tested various range of the missile, including intercontinental ballistic missile, theoretically speaking, that can hit target any city in the United States. And it also develops cyber warfare. So the KIC generates some economic gain, some economic opportunity cost, but the magnitude is very small and fail to constrain conflict behavior. Okay, let's talk about the signaling, the second theory, and let's try to apply this idea to KIC experience. So KIC, Kaesong Industrial Complex, serve as a strong signaling tool for both Korea. North Korea used the limited suspension of KIC operation to express its discontent with the South Korean government under President Lee Myung-bak and President Park Geun-hye, because they were both hardliner against Pyongyang. In March, let me give you some example here. So in March 28, North Korean forced 11 South Korean officials to leave the Inter-Korean Exchange and Cooperation Office in Kaesong. And thus, again, same year, 9 months later, the regime imposed limitation on the hours and numbers of South Koreans allowed to pass the border. The following year, the North Korea closed its border gate at Kaesong in response to joint US-South Korea military exercise that actually left hundreds of South Koreans working at the complex couldn't come back, stranded in the city for days. In April 2013, the regime unilaterally shut down the KIC again after the tension arose over the US-South Korean military drill. So South Korean is pretty much the same story, but in a different context and different ways. So South Korean government, especially under conservative president, they also utilize the KIST to send North Korea the strong message about their stance and resolve. So they explicitly, they show that they would be willing to endure economic disruption and costs inflicted by the regime. And they even impose economic costs on themselves to send strong political message that South Korean wouldn't tolerate North Korea's military provocation and wouldn't accommodate North Korea's excessive demands. So South Korean government refused to accept North Korea's demands for wage and land lease increase in 2009 and 2015, 2 times. And especially after the Cheonan incident, the Lee member government imposed a ban on new investment in the Kaesong industrial complex. And it was also, North Korea's 4th nuclear test and long-range rocket test in early 2016 that eventually incentivized Park Geun-hye administration, the government, to shut down the complex and withdraw all South Korean nationals from the complex. So KRC, the Kaesong Industrial Complex, was a focal point between 2 Korea when they want to express their dissatisfaction with the counterpart, the policy toward North Korea. However, the tug of war over KRC didn't really cause significant economic costs, as I already mentioned when I talk about constraining, because of its this deficient role in both Korea's economies. And the signaling through the KIC policy and operation didn't also create any concession, any policy or behavioral concession or compromise on security matters. Rather, the KIC was dependent. It was dependent on the inter-Korean relationship revolving around North Korea's increasing nuclear and missile capability. So KIC served as a tool to punish its counterpart or further escalate political and security issues, and actually quite fell short of bringing in policy concession or behavioral concession. And one more thing, the constant disruption of the KIC operation eventually led to lost opportunity for both Korea to develop the complex into the full-fledged inter-Korean economic and liberal project as initially planned in early 2000 when it was first discussed. So the last casual mechanism suggests that KIC can drive the two countries to change their preference and interest, increasing shared and common interests and decreasing conflictual perspective and mindset. So thanks to the development of and operation of the Kaesong Industrial Complex, there emerged a network of political party, bureaucrat, business scholars, research institute, and journalists and civic groups in South Korea, favoring more economic engagement. And the Democratic Party of Korea, as a major political party in South Korea, has been quite key player initiating and promoting the idea of economic engagement with North Korea. And another key player here is Corporate Association of Kaesong Industrial Complex. So this group was formed in 2006 to address the issues relevant to development and operation of a complex, and they try to protect its business interests and try to promote public relations to support the KIC expansion and development. So this business group continuously expressed their concern when there was suspension of KIC operation, and when there was when the security environments got worsened, because they were concerned about their business interest in the complex. And since the complete shutdown of the KIC in 2016, this business group continued to lobby the South Korean and US government and Congress for inter-Korean dialogue and possible reopening of the KIC. So despite this emergence of coalition and stakeholder favoring economic engagement with North Korea, but I will say that there has been limited and very stalled transformative effect in South Korea and North Korea. So above all, in South Korea, talking about South Korea, the domestic political change in South Korea made development and operation of the complex very uncertain and very vulnerable to political and security issues. The Sunshine Policy era president Kim Dae-jun and Roh Moo-hyun, they really tried to separate economic cooperation from political and security issues, and they believe that the KIC must be a cornerstone of inter-Korean cooperation, and that should bring about political reconciliation between two Koreas by promoting more cooperation and enhancing security around the Korean Peninsula. But the successor, the Lee Myung-bak government, and successor Park Geun-hye government, and these two conservative presidents had a very different view about the KIC. And they tried to link security issues to the KIC development and expansion. So they had a very skeptical view about the KIC potential and their prospect, because they had more concern about North Korea's increasing nuclear weapons and missile capability. So, as we have seen, South Korea political change in South Korea, because of the frequent changes in political power in South Korea, the South Korean policy toward North Korea were not quite inconsistent, and eventually the approach toward the KIC has been very susceptible to different political views. And South Korean government couldn't really have a consensual and unified approach toward the KIC. So that kind of inconsistent policy also explain why KIC, there were stop and go experience with the KIC. And North Korea. So what about North Korea? Oh, excuse me. Okay, so, all right. And one more thing I want to talk about is public support for the KIC in South Korea is not consensual. It is pretty much divided in South Korea. So majority of South Koreans do believe that economic engagement is necessary to promote peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula. But when it comes to KIC and its reopening, very much bifurcated, very much divided in South Korea. So 51% of South Koreans said that KIC only should be conditionally reopened, which means security environment has to be considered to talk about reopening of the complex. And another survey reports about 44% of South Korean favor KIC resumption, while about 46% oppose the reopening of the Kaesong Industrial Complex. Again, a lot of people had security concern and the impact of KIC on the security on the Korean Peninsula. So this is the recent survey about public confidence in North Korea commitment to peace has also showed the public hasn't really moved toward favoring the economic engagement and reopening the Kaesong Industrial Complex. The public confidence in North Korea commitment to peace has also declined over 2 decades. There was a little bit of fluctuation, but overall decline from 52% in 2000 to about 33% in 2020. Okay. Then what about transformative effect in North Korea? And I want to talk about this first. So there has been a glimpse of evidence that KIC may have provided North Korea with the opportunity to taste the principle and institution of capitalist operation. A few studies report the North Korean workers' behavior and their perspective changes who work at the complex. So having experienced capitalism and adjusted to the new working environment, those North Korean workers in the complex recognize self-interest and develop kind of new identity that made them have a desire to stay and work, continue to work in the complex. And also another study finds that the North Korean official working with the South Korean official and businessmen and women, they became quite interested in capitalist tax and accounting system, and they try to learn merit-based incentive through higher productivity, and they also try to learn know-how in running operating the industrial complex. Okay, so when we talk about the limited sphere of the Kaesong Industrial Complex and talk about North Korean official and workers who work with the South Korean national, there is a very quite few evidence that we may expect more transformational effect in North Korea, but at the national level, when we talk about the regime itself, it's very hard to tell that KIC significantly contribute to changes in Pyongyang's preference and interest in favor of less confrontation and more cooperation with South Korea. Very hard to tell. And North Korea foreign policy and behavior largely reflected on its power consolidation around the new leader Kim Jong-un over the past decade. And his policy, Byungjin, it's a Korean word, a parallel movement, and his Byungjin policy, which pursued simultaneous development of the military and economy, actually increased North Korean nuclear and missile capability that also invited the international sanction against the regime. So because of that, so this kind of international sanction and North Koreans' principle and policy choice kind of depressed foreign investment and trade through special economic zones like KIC. And also, some hope outside the hope, international hope for North Korea adopting more market-friendly economic policy also, disappeared as the regime continue regime is attached to its principle of 주체, self-reliance, and 성군, military first policies. So these are these two principles quite heavily embedded in North Korean politics today. And meanwhile, North Korea has become quite dependent, relying on China for its foreign trade and economic cooperation. under Kim Jong-un regime. So that actually made inter-Korean economic project like the KIC became less influential and less significant in transforming North Korean officials, the regime's perspective about economic cooperation and security matters on the Korean Peninsula. So in 2019, the Kim Jong-un, North Korean leader, expressed his desire to reopen the KIC in his New Year speech. But so far, the regime has not made any concession that would partially lift the economic sanction by the Security Council. Okay? So North Korean regime hasn't done anything to lift the sanctions. That's the reality. Okay, so conclusion. So far I talk about three different approach linking economic ties to security on the Korean Peninsula. Economic ties can constrain conflict behavior. Economic ties can allow country to make a costly signal that reduce the probability of war and conflict between two countries. And economic ties, higher level of economic ties can also change the leaders and people's stakeholders, ideas and preference about conflict and cooperation. So I believe understanding these clear pathway causal mechanisms is very important because it can prevent a naive hope and unfounded political claim against economic engagement from dominating discourse on the peace process on the Korean Peninsula. The lack of theoretical understanding between understanding of the nexus between economic cooperation and security I believe, already done harm to South Korean politics. It is very politicized and people are divided without providing the causal mechanism and theoretical and empirical evidence. So KIC advocates, using this framework, KIC advocate, they can offer better accounts for the nexus between economic cooperation and security. And it will be beneficial for them and other scholars interested in this matter to monitor those causal mechanisms separately, because these mechanisms cannot happen at the same time, at the same pace. So which one could be more salient than the other? So it's important to monitor which mechanism is salient, more salient, and have some prospect of bringing pacifying effect on the Korean Peninsula. Okay? So this using this framework, and they can monitor and they can evaluate. They can make prediction about the future potential of the economic cooperation between North and South Korea. And they can also suggest the effective policy to reinforce any of these mechanisms. And for the same reason, I believe these causal mechanisms allow even skeptics to monitor and evaluate the economic cooperation and try to understand the complicated relationship between economics and security. But getting back to the reality, and we all know that the KIC has been closed since 2016, so already almost 6 years passed, and nuclear negotiation not going anyway. And last month, North Korea fired ballistic missile a lot. So people don't talk about the KIC. And some people think KIC is the dead project. But I do believe KIC has kind of deserved the second round. But reopening the KIC wouldn't guarantee any positive impact on the security. As I mentioned throughout my talk, it is very important to address the issues we found from the past KIC experience. So this is kind of to-do list, not all, but some to-do list before we even discuss the possibility of reopening the KIC. The first one is, of course, we need to address the security environment on the Korean Peninsula, especially North Korean nuclear weapons program and missile program. Okay, without addressing security concern, there's no way we can even think about reopening the KIC. And so the KIC, reopening the KIC has to be a part of peace deal, part of the peace process on the Korean Peninsula. And we need to think about how to calibrate the timing of the easing the international sanction by United Nations Security Council and to discuss when we can even incorporate the reopening of the economic engagement in the broader building peace process. The second one is, so I think I have like 2 minutes. The second one is reaching domestic consensus is very important in South Korea. As I mentioned, public are divided. Without strong domestic support, then KIC, another round of KIC will face again and stop and go process again. Thus, the next one is addressing claim that North Korea may use the revenue from the KIC to increase their missile and nuclear weapon programs. So we have to think about some measure like paying the salary directly to North Korean workers. And North Korea may dislike this idea, but we can push for this case. And another one is, yes, we need to improve the KIC in terms of quality and magnitude, and we need to solve operational and technical difficulty like a custom and border and some use of internet and labor supply. And we also need to think about how to solve those operational difficulty to enhance KIC efficiencies. Okay, so I will stop here. Thank you for listening, and I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chung, for your talk and for presenting those your theoretical analysis, particularly of the link between the Korean economic ties to security in relation to the shutdown of the Kaesong Industrial Complex in 2016. For the audience, if you have any questions, please list your questions in the Q&A chat below. I have a few questions for you. The first question is, using Ukraine and Russia's very strong economic ties, and in particular Russia's direct invasion and control of Ukraine as an example, how should North or South Korea be prevented from thinking that conquering the other is the best way to get the maximum economic gain?
Okay, so this is quite interesting question. So from South Korean perspective, so the economic gains through the conquering the territory. Okay, but why this cannot be an option for North Korea, even for South Korea? Is that the question, right?
Yes, and how do we prevent them from thinking such? Using the Ukraine and the Russians example.
Okay, so first of all, on the Korean Peninsula, there has been deterrence working. So I said the KIC didn't really contribute to peace and security on the Korean Peninsula, but as we all know, there has been the absence of the major military conflict between these two countries, not because of the KIC or economic cooperation, but because of the deterrence working quite effectively. So of course, we have a U.S. Military presence in South Korea, and United States provide a nuclear umbrella for South Korea and Japan. So deterrence is still in effect. So I don't believe that North Korea is considering the conquering the South Korean territory to capture the value of economic asset. And this is a little bit different from the context of Ukraine and Russia, because Ukraine to my knowledge, Ukraine wanted to join the NATO to increase its security, right? So Russia President Putin didn't want to see Ukraine to join the NATO and European Union. So Russia preemptively invade Ukraine to stop that, because they will make the balance of the military power between two countries tipping toward Ukraine. So that's the I believe that's the motivation, the first major motivation for Putin to invade Ukraine. But on the Korean Peninsula, I still believe that deterrence is in effect, and so economic cooperation may have pacifying effect rather than the higher degree of economic interdependence may incentivize North Korea to see the opportunity or to monopolize, to be more, obviously more greedier than before, to capture and take control of the economic asset.
Thank you so much. And just building on what you just finished explaining in relation to that first question, a lot of the emphasis on your presentation is on the KIC importance, and I believe that it plays a significant political and economic role to North Korea and South Korea. So the question is, how much of the value of the KIC is political rather than economic to both North Korea and South Korea?
Yes, so KIC had a very big symbolic power of the inter-Korean connection. There was tourism developed by South Korean company in North Korea, but it was also closed. So KIC was the only piece of connection between North and South Korea. So it has a symbolic image, and people may not talk about the liberal peace, but people, as I said, majority of people believe that the only way, we have very few options to solve the North Korean problem, North Korean military problems. So maybe stronger deterrence, and maybe even inviting tactical nuclear weapon to South Korea could be one option to put pressure on North Korea. But it has a limitation. And military option to remove the North Korean leader is not. It could be an option, but it has also limitation. There's no guarantee that this kind of military operation may not raise tension on the Korean Peninsula and may not cause massive civilian casualties on the Korean Peninsula. So military options are quite limited, and people, I believe, are aware that, and majority of people believe that economic engagement is is capable, even though it's not going to work very soon. So they believe in this liberal project and economic engagement. So KIC still remain a political power, and it's the image of the inter-Korean economic cooperation, and maybe deserving, as I said, another round of operation. So it has political power, and this power will never go away soon, because this is the last one and viable and liberal peace project. Democracy and international institution, these are other liberal forces fostering liberal peace, but democracy is not going to happen soon in North Korea, and international institution is, I would say, less important and less influential than the other two. So this is the last one, and people still have a hope, and I still believe there is a potential to make it liberal peace project working, but a lot of things to do.
That's very interesting. It's really interesting to hear how much of the political implication does that project have on both North Korea and South Korea. I want to go back to your analysis that you presented in your talk today, and just present the question based on your analysis. Do you assume that North Korea wants more national wealth and economic development as much as the typical state? For example, the Pyongyang, which was rejected by Trump's offer to help North Korea build international resorts.
Yes, there's a very good reason for North Korea to develop its economy and raise revenue from foreign economic transaction. But still, North Korea. This is very important. North Korea is still fixated on security issues, regime survival. So yes, North Korea, Kim Jong-un wants to reopen the KIC because it's good for them to get some hard currency and give the local worker jobs. So it's good. But at the same time, without addressing the security, North Koreans' regime survival, they are worried about their regime survival. North Korea wouldn't really go further to maximize economic gains by giving up much on nuclear weapon without any guarantee, any security guarantee.
Thank you. And just building on that, you mentioned in your presentation that it is hard to tell that KIC made the North Korean government more cooperative and less confrontational. Isn't it clear that KIC completely failed to do this?
Yes, KIC. It's not because of KIC failure. KIC didn't contribute to transformation of leaders in the North Korean leaders in the perspective about security and economic cooperation. So yes, it's not because the KIC failed, but KIC didn't really contribute. Again, the regime's obsession with the survival and security guarantee. So those Korean weapons as an insurance policy, they will not give up on nuclear weapon easily without any security guarantee. And so that's why I said KIC reopening cannot be done overnight. It has to be a part of peace process, and it has to be devised and discussed with other major political power. United States and even China and Japan have to join, and they have to discuss when the opening of economic cooperation can be even discussed at what stage. That has to be the first step.
And just out of curiosity, did any of this KIC and economic cooperation conversation, did they surface during Trump administration meetings or dialogues?
As far as I know, the KIC was not on the negotiating table. Because again, those people who advocate for reopening the KIC, mostly South Korean national and business owner who had a facility at the complex in Kaesong. So more like KIC has a symbolic value, but I believe from U.S. perspective, KIC is just part of the incentive that South Korea or United States can provide the North Korea, and when North Korea is committed to denuclearization process, and if there is a clear verification of for example, closing the nuclear facility at Yongbyon, so that could be the clear sign for United States or South Korea to consider. So it's a part of the peace process, and United States, I don't believe that Trump was focusing on the KIC explicitly.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to pivot a little bit. We've been talking about KIC and the economic cooperation. So I'm going to pivot a little bit, and I want us to focus on the KIC workers, the employees. And I want to ask you this question. Can you please discuss the human rights aspect of KIC? It was stated and highlighted that the North Korean government has reportedly exploits its KIC workers by taking much of their earnings, and South Korean businesses that have used KIC are being blamed for benefiting from cheap and mistreated labor. So can you please elaborate on the human rights aspect of that?
Yes, so human rights issue. This issue emerged years ago, and when people discuss the creation of KIC, they didn't even think about this kind of aspect, and now it is one of the important issue. And in my presentation, I kind of skip or play down. I didn't really include the human rights concern. So South Korea pay North Korea in terms of hard currency for worker salary. So there's no direct payment, and North Korean government tax quite high rate of tax, and the remainder, the rest of the money can be distributed to North Korean worker in terms of local currency or some other coupon. They can exchange it with the food or some other essential and goods. So to address human rights issues, and I think human rights issues has to be also on the negotiating on the table when we negotiate with North Korea to reopen and to make KIC work better and more effectively. So direct payment could be one way to address human rights concern, and South Korea government, I believe, has to demand more autonomy. I mean, the South Korean company may demand more autonomy over the management and operating the KIC. So then I think the human rights concern, not all, some part of human rights concern can be addressed if South Korean government, South Korean company have more control of the management, and direct payment could be implemented.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chun Chang. And I think that's a very good end to our insights today. I'd like to thank you for your time and for sharing your work with us. I'd like to also thank our audience who are able to link in and join the seminar and the insight today. Our next EWC Insight will be next year. It's going to be on Wednesday, the 18th of January, 2023 at 2 p.m. Hawaii time. Our speakers are going to be Miku Narasawa, sorry, my apologies, and Yasumoto Nishidate. The topic of their talk will be on coastal community sustainability in Japan, oyster farming, and local voices of disaster recovery at Matsushima Bay. Once again, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Chung, and have a